Dear friends, we gather this afternoon to remember and to celebrate the life of one who filled our world with her love, her goodness, her spirit, her outstanding example. In humility and gratitude, we turn to the wisdom of our tradition for comfort, for guidance, and for understanding. Throughout the centuries, whenever our people were confused, challenged, in distress, they would say, "I lift my eyes to the mountains. From where comes my help? My help comes from God, the maker of heaven and of earth." I lift up my eyes unto the mountains, from where does my help come? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and of earth. Ezri me'im Adonai, Oseh shamayim va'aretz, Esainai el Earim me'ayin Yavo Ezri. I lift up my eyes unto the mountains, from where will my help come? Adonai, what are we that you have regard for us? What are we that you are mindful of us? We are like a breath. Our days are like a passing shadow. We come and go like grass, which in the morning shoots up renewed, and in the evening fades and withers. You cause us to turn to dust, saying, "Return, O mortal creatures." Would that we were wise, that we understood whither we are going. For when we die, we carry nothing away. Our glory does not accompany us. Mark the wholehearted, and behold the upright. They shall have peace. For those of you for whom the 23rd Psalm is familiar, I invite you to join with me in its recitation. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. When I die, remember me with a smile and laughter. If thoughts of me provoke no love, only sadness and tears, I ask that I be soon forgotten. Give what's left of me away to children and old ones who wait to die. And if you must cry, cry for your brother or sister who walks in grief beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around anyone and give them what you need to give to me. You can love me most by letting love live within the circle of your arms, embracing the frightened ones. Love doesn't die. People do. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away. My dear Henry, Lori, Lisa, Roger, Linda, dear grandchildren, family, dear friends, there is a well-known text from the book of Proverbs that is frequently invoked at the funeral of a loved one. It is used so often that it has become something of a cliche, and I therefore actually try to avoid it. As I thought about Joyce Edheimer, however, her extraordinary qualities of generosity, thoughtfulness, compassion, and selfless concern, as I thought about her seeming genetic disposition to think only of others, as I thought about her talents and abilities, the relationships she cherished, and the accomplishments she was much too humble to acknowledge, as I thought about her always comforting, optimistic spirit, her supreme love of and devotion to family, and the stellar way in which her husband, children, and loved ones speak of her, certain phrases from the passage in Proverbs kept reverberating in my mind. And I realized that this text from our tradition speaks eloquently of her, and I would be remiss to ignore it. A woman of valor who can find becomes even more powerful when we realize that the Hebrew with which it begins, Eshet Chayo, might more accurately be translated as a woman of strength. There was something indomitable about Joyce. In her sweetness, her goodness, her constant concern for others, she was not a pushover. She was focused, determined, intentional. She knew what she was doing and how she wanted to accomplish whatever goal she had in mind. And she was always in a hurry because there was so much to do. It was hard to keep up with her. She was strong-minded and could be strong-willed, especially when her loved ones were concerned. When Lisa discovered that she needed a liver transplant, Joyce and Henry could not have been more supportive, encouraging, or resourceful. And when Lisa miraculously received the life-giving organ, it was Joyce who lovingly, generously, determinedly, and entirely happily nursed her back to health over a period of months at the house on Snowberry Lane. When her children, as young parents, needed some extra help, the response was always unhesitatingly, "Bring them to me," or she went immediately to them, to Lori and Richard in Columbus, to Roger and Stephanie in Chicago, to Lisa and Kobe in Chappaqua. And all of the families loved to gather in Florida, where the house in Wellington was always open. The welcome was sunny, bright, and warm, whatever the weather. The activities were plentiful, and Joyce was in her element. There was something about her attitude, her strong belief in and commitment to family, her very being, that created the atmosphere in which they all just loved being together. They almost took it for granted. It was the most normal and natural thing in the world for the family to be together, the immediate family, which frequently included Joyce's baby sister, Linda, and Gary, Zichrono Livracha, Chip, Bobby, and Jennifer. The Melcher clan now includes Alice, Melissa, and Joshua, as well as Edward, Cole, Lex, Reese, Addie, Leo, Reef, and Eliana. If Joyce was strong about anything, it was family, immediate, extended, and extended family of dear friends as well. A woman of strength, who can find? She was not materialistic. As Henry described, if you gave her $100, she would give back 150. There were certain luxuries, however, that she appreciated. When she was growing up, cashmere sweater sets were very much the fashion. She would not ask her parents for something she could not justify as a necessity, so she went to work. She worked very hard and for long hours and earned every penny she needed to purchase her desired sweater sets. She was focused. She was disciplined. and she was not afraid of hard work. And when Linda asked to wear her clothes, whatever she had was generously shared, with no conditions, no exceptions, and no consequences if something came back with a spot or a snag. She was, after all, a woman of strength, strength of conviction, strength of character, strength of spirit. Our tradition has this to say about such a unique individual. A woman of strength, who can find? She is more precious than rubies. Her husband trusts in her, and so he lacks nothing. She does him good, never harm, all the days of her life. She perceives that her labor is rewarding. Her candle burns on into the night. She reaches out to those in need and extends her hands to the poor. She is clothed in dignity, and she faces the future cheerfully. She speaks with wisdom. The law of kindness is on her lips. Her children rise up and bless her. Her husband sings her praises. Many daughters have done valiantly, but you excel them all. It is as if the poet of so many centuries ago had known her, had basked in the radiance of her presence, the friendly message of her smile, the wisdom of her words, the joy of her laughter. She drew people to her with her warmth, her non-judgmental acceptance, her modesty and humility, and yet her upbeat nature and spontaneous love of life. We wanted to be near her, to be with her, to share in whatever she was doing. Anything we could do for her was a joy. And it was always so rare, because she would not allow it. She thought it was her responsibility to look after and worry about us, as recently as last week, and never vice versa. A woman of strength. As the first of David and Gertrude Leisman's children, Sister Linda arrived 4 years later. Joyce came by her strength and resilience, as well as her goodness, quite honestly. As Joyce and Linda are first-generation Americans, their parents came here as immigrants from that part of Eastern Europe that was sometimes Poland and sometimes Russia. Gertrude came as a young girl, and of 11 or possibly 13. She and her siblings were somewhat flexible with their ages, as they all had to be under the age of 18 to come in as children together. When they all arrived with their mother, they were reunited with their father, who had left 8 years earlier in order to send for them. David arrived first in Montreal with his family at the age of 2. But as they did not feel welcome there, the family moved to Brooklyn. Their father died when David was just 14 years old. They were so poor that the children shared shoes. David went to night high school so that he could work for a dental courier during the day. He wanted very much to be a dentist and was a year short of graduating from dental school when the Depression hit, and with a wife and with Joyce on the way, he could not finish. When David's brother Morris found a job in Cleveland, David joined him here, where he found work at a gas station. He eventually owned his own service station at Mayfield and Middlehurst. We are grateful for all of the Leisman descendants, many of whom continue to grace our city and community. With all of their hardships, David and Gertrude were wonderful people whose children emulated their finest qualities. When Joyce was a year old, David and Gertrude moved from Cleveland to Silsby Road near Cedar Center in University Heights. As nothing was yet developed there, Gertrude was miserable, and they moved back to Eddy Road near Arlington in the city. They eventually moved back to University Heights, but not until both Joyce and Linda were teenagers. She perceives that her labor is rewarding. Her candle burns on into the night. After a year at Ohio State, Joyce went to work. For a brief time while staying with David's sister, Aunt Ann and Uncle Saul Smith in New York, and then back in Cleveland as a secretary. Joyce not only worked hard and effectively, she was quite frugal and very proud that she and Henry were able to save enough to buy their own home, which they did while Henry was building his career on his way to owning his own company as a manufacturer's rep. She stopped working when her children were born, but but returned to help Henry when they were older. A favorite story from that time involves a bad day for Henry and a disagreement that concluded when Henry yelled at Joyce to just go home. That night at dinner, everything seemed perfectly fine, but the next day, Joyce did not come in for work. He called. Joyce responded, "You fired me, and I quit." He called again. Nothing changed. The third time he called, he said, "I'm sorry." Joyce replied, "I can't hear you. What did you say?" Henry replied with full voice and heart, "I'm sorry." A woman of strength, who can find? She speaks with wisdom. Her children rise up and bless her. Her husband sings her praises. In just a few moments, you will hear Roger, Lisa, and Laurie's reflections on Joyce as a mother. But over and over again, they affirm how lucky they feel to have had Joyce as their mom. She was loving, accepting, funny, and gave them all a sense of perspective. She was very present as a mother, but did not hover. She gave them space to grow and learn and make mistakes. She was practical and down to earth. When Lisa was miserable, majoring in architecture, Joyce's response was, "Who told you to be an architect? Do what you want to do." When each child threatened to run away from home, she supported their choices. But when any of them were seriously anxious or worried, she was comforting and reassured them that everything was going to be fine. It would work out. It would be good. She believed that. And because she believed it, life worked out most of the time. Her concern was only for each of them and their well-being. She was generosity personified and was happiest when each of them was doing well. She adored Laurie, Roger, and Lisa, and with Henry was delighted when Laurie married Richard, when Roger found his Stephanie, and when Lisa married Kobe. Each of her children's spouses became a child of her heart, never a child-in-law. And her life took on a new dimension as her wonderful grandchildren began to arrive. Emily, who is sending her love today from Israel. Allison, Matthew, Daniel, Michael, Ariel, Samantha, Devin, and Garrett, who is particularly distraught that his grandmother will not be here to celebrate with him when he becomes a bar mitzvah on June 8th. While I know it provides little comfort today, there is no question in my mind that Joyce will be with you on June 8th, and going forward will be with every member of this family at moments of challenge and difficulty and at moments of great joy and celebration. The missing will continue, but so will the sense of gratitude and even joy at the many gifts she bequeathed to you. She is more precious than rubies. She is clothed in dignity and she faces the future cheerfully. She speaks with wisdom. The law of kindness is on her lips. Her husband trusts in her and so he lacks nothing. She does him good, never harm, all the days of her life. The first time he ever saw her was at a Howard Johnson's. He caught sight of her beautiful blue eyes and thought, that woman is for me. They actually met, subsequent to that initial sighting, at a dear friend of Joyce's, Sue Weinstein's parents' house. Henry doesn't remember why they were both there, but he vividly remembers how powerfully he was drawn to her and continued to be every day of their far too brief 59 years together. They were lovers, partners, teammates, companions. They shared a magnificent life together for which Henry could not be more grateful and about which he cannot say enough. I was deeply moved by all that Henry said about Joyce. Having come from a family of difficult relationships, Henry deeply appreciated Joyce and the warm, close family she brought with her. She was a great woman, and he knew how lucky he was to have her. As he put it, she had everything I didn't deserve. She never asked for anything and never wanted anything for herself. She didn't have an unkind bone in her body. I loved everything about her, and whatever I did was good enough for her. Linda added that she was so pretty, so attractive, and Linda looked up to her as someone who seemed perfect in her eyes. She never said a bad word about anyone and did not engage in gossip of any kind. Her husband trusts in her. Joyce was the one who paid the bills and kept track of all the finances in their home and in the business. Until just days ago, Henry had no idea where the checkbook was. And if someone owed money to the business, Joyce was the one who went after that person. She was the tough one. She was a woman of strength, after all, whose idiosyncratic filing system was an organized chaos of piles of statements, receipts, bills, and records which only she could find. She was always concerned about everyone else, never herself. Even after her own devastating diagnosis, she worried about Henry, about her children and grandchildren. There was never anything she needed or needed done for her. Every morning of these last few months, Henry would come down to make sure she was still with us, and she could still reassure Laurie and Lisa that they didn't have to worry about anything because she worried enough for everyone. She never wanted to be the center of attention. She didn't care about country clubs or status symbols. She enjoyed a luxury item every now and then, as it made her feel special. She was beautiful, inside and out. She was amazingly kind, compassionate, and open-hearted. She was selfless, loving, a perfect wife, an outstanding mother, an exceptional grandmother. She was a friend as well as a mother. The girls spoke with her 3 and 4 times a day. Roger called somewhat less often, but he was no less connected. Her rewarding labor included her household, where she gardened a bit, and Henry told her that her tomatoes were more expensive than the ones in the grocery store. She hung wallpaper and did decoupage. She had a library of cookbooks with which she loved to experiment, most memorably with chocolate chicken, or mole chicken. It was not very good, but the concept has entered family lore. She was not a very good cook, even with all of her experimentation. She enjoyed the process, however, and had her own repertoire of standards, chief among them being her brownies. They were made from a Costco brownie mix and were beloved because she undercooked them, rendering them soft and chewy. Joyce's repertoire and experiments were part of the mystique of Friday nights that she and Linda made possible every Friday night after Grandma Gertrude passed away. Sometimes it was at Joyce and Henry's, sometimes it was at Linda and Gary's, and eventually it moved to Sunday nights, but the family always gathered. It was that important. Less than 5 years ago, the 16 of them all went on a cruise together. Laurie refers to it as the drug cartel cruise that took them to Haiti, Cozumel, and Jamaica. It was Emily's 18th birthday, Henry's 80th, and his and Joyce's 55th wedding anniversary. They all liked being together, and this was a great trip for everyone, despite losing Joyce on Jamaica for a period of time. Her children rise up and bless her. These last weeks and months of illness have been a remarkable, profound time for every member of the family, but especially for Laurie, Lisa, Roger, Linda, and Henry, as they have all rallied around her in every possible way to guard her and protect her, to care for her and provide for her every need, even when unexpressed. Laurie and Lisa were her on-site caregivers as they tag-teamed caring for her every other week. They were extraordinary, as they wanted only to give their mother the unconditional love, care, devotion, and support she had unstintingly given to them for their whole lives. They were beyond generous and beyond devoted. They were true guardian angels of comfort and compassion. They were supported by Linda's invaluable presence and support as she came by to help and to relieve them every single day. Roger came in as often as possible from Chicago and was constantly in touch with Henry as well. And now she is at rest. We derive comfort from the celebration of her birthday just this last Monday, January 21st, when she spoke to every one of her beloved grandchildren. She summoned all of her energy and her most positive sounding voice so that her grandchildren would not worry about her. They all called from wherever they were. They all told her that they loved her and how much she meant to each of them. It was her 81st birthday. She had everything she never asked for, but always hoped to achieve. A woman of strength, who can find? She is more precious than rubies. Many daughters have done valiantly, but you excel them all. Zichrona livracha. May her memory be always for blessing. And let us say, Amen. It is a fearful thing to love what death can touch. A fearful thing to love, hope, dream, to be. To be and oh, to lose a thing for fools this and a holy thing to love. For your life has lived in me. Your laugh once lifted me. Your word was gift to me. To remember this brings painful joy. 'Tis a human thing, love, a holy thing, to love what death has touched. I call now on Roger, Lori, and Lisa, who will share their reflections with us.
Good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for coming. It means a lot to our family. I happened to be with my mother the day that she was in the hospital, and the doctor came to her and told her the bad news that she had a tumor, an aggressive tumor that could not be operated on. Of course, we were all sad at the time. But what I remember most about the occasion was my mother, with tears in her eyes, looking at the doctor and saying, "Do the best you can do. I need as much time as possible. I need to take care of Henry. I have a couple more graduations to go to and a bar mitzvah I need to be at in the spring." Then she looked at me and smiled and said, "Roger, call your daughters and hurry up and tell them to get married." It was funny because my daughters didn't even have boyfriends at the time. But in my mom's eyes, I could do no wrong. She always referred to me as her favorite son. Of course, I was the only son. But there was one time in all the years where my mom became upset with me because it had something to do with the grandkids. My oldest daughter, Emily, graduated from college a few years ago at the University of Illinois in Champaign. And my mother was having terrible knee pains at the time, and she needed a knee replacement, so I called her up and I suggested for her not to come. And she didn't really say much, but she said, "I'll think about it, and I'll give you a call back." She immediately called up my sister Lori and said, "How dare your brother? He just told me I shouldn't come. I will be there." Well, the day came, and there was a lot of walking, a lot of stairs to climb. The weather was very hot, and a lot of people complaining. But of the 30,000 people in attendance that day at the stadium, I don't think there was anybody there that was happier or more proud than my mother to see her oldest grandchild graduate. My mother was the easiest person to buy a gift for her birthday, for Mother's Day, for Hanukkah. We simply take the latest picture of the grandkids and put it into a picture frame and give it to her. And she was so happy. Once in a while, we thought this is just too easy, so we'd buy her like some jewelry or some clothing, a juicer, a coffee maker, and she would open up the gift, and she would say, "Why'd you get this for me?" and give it back to us and say, "Return it and buy something for your kids." But my mother had all these picture frames in her house by this table where she sat, and there were so many, you probably couldn't even see the kids' faces because there were so many, and people would always knock into the table, and they would fall over like dominoes. But to my mom, it was the most beautiful thing in the world to look at her grandkids. Those were her trophies. That's what made her happy. Today, as we say goodbye to my mother, we feel very fortunate to have had her for so many years. She was special. She was one of the best.
were so lucky. We were raised by wonderful parents. The one word I would use to describe my mom, selfless. 2 weeks ago, am I too short? Oh, yeah. 2 weeks ago, I got that from my mother. 2 weeks ago, she was rushed to the hospital with a terrible infection, and it landed her in ICU. Her concern that evening was, what would my brother, my father, and I have for dinner? And then she said, don't forget there's leftover Chinese in the refrigerator. She reminded me about that, and then when we would come to Cleveland to help her, we'd have to sneak into town to see her. She didn't want any of us to leave our family. She had a knee replacement after Emily's graduation, and my father called me without my mom knowing and said, I need some help. So I came to Cleveland, and I walked in, and she would drop her mouth open. So what are you doing here? And my sister said she wanted to come to town. So I pretended I was going to lunch with my friend Beth over there, and I actually went to the airport and picked up my sister. My sister walked in. Again, she'd open her mouth, upset that we'd leave our families and come take care of her, but that's what we wanted to do. She was our rock. She was our secret keeper, and she was our strength. And to quote Winnie the Pooh, how lucky am I to have something that makes saying goodbye so hard.
My mother was always there for us. My mother was there during bed rest, during pregnancies for Lori and myself. I used to travel a lot overseas for business, and my mother would always take my children. Even after having surgery of her own, she never refused. She never complained. She always insisted. When I arrived back to pick up my child or so, I was always surprised. She shared her obsession with ice cream with my son Matthew. I picked him up. We went to the airport. He could not stop saying, ice cream. Where did you learn it? Grandma. One time, flying to Cleveland, the flight attendants could not stop commenting how beautiful my son Daniel was, how pretty she was. Lori and my mother took him to the barber shop, who butchered his hair. My mother said, there's more of his face to love. After having 2 boys, we did not want to know the sex of my third child. My mom hated secrets. She called the doctor to find out. When showing up at the hospital, she had a suitcase of pink clothing. She was also good at keeping secrets. Lori and I call often. Who else do we tell? Our mother and friend. And so many secrets she has never shared with my father. The last year has been filled with a lot of joy and sadness. My mother was there, always there for me. My liver transplant. I'm sorry. No one was happier to receive the phone calls than her. And that's all I could write. I'm sorry. I miss her.
She's happy you got the transplant.
Thank you for those magnificent, heartfelt tributes to your mom and very special friend. Oh God, you give us loved ones and make them the strength of our life, the light of our eyes. They depart and leave us bereft on a lonely way, but you are the living fountain from which our healing flows. To you the stricken look for comfort and the sorrow-laden for consolation. Oh God, we see life as through windows that open on eternity. We see that love endures and the soul endures, as you, O God, endure forever. We see that the years are more than grass that withers, more than flowers that fade. They weave a timeless pattern in a world that is the dwelling place of your love and glory. Please rise. Shochein bamromi עצי מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה עם קדושים וטהורים כזור רקיע מזהירים את נשמת היקרה שלנו שהלכה לעולמה בעל הרחמים יסתיריה בסתר כנפיו לעולמים ויצרו החיים את נשמתה אדוני הוא נחלתה ותנוח בשלום על משכבה ונאמר Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Joyce Elaine Edheimer, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in your eternal presence, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.